This is the 6-minute review for the Gemara in Nazir Daf Zayin, a difficult daf. Let's pick it up in the bottom of Vav Amid Beis, in which we quote the Brisa that says that the Shita of Rav Yonasan, that you're concluding the month, Yom Shetzrichen Lemalois. And the Gemara says, and that's how we learn 29 days. Every Hebrew month is 29 and a half days. Have you asked the Gemara, how do you know it means concluding the month? Maybe it means concluding the week. Says the Gemara, a week doesn't have anything lacking to fill it up. A month has something lacking to fill it up, but not a week. Says the Gemara, okay, maybe it means the top of Zayin Amud Aleph. Maybe it means a year. Says the Gemara, we don't count a year by days, as the Rabbanan of Kisri taught us that we don't count a year by days, but rather we count it by month, as the Torah teaches the Chadshei Hashana, Chadashim, we count the month by, but not by days. And we continue with the new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, if someone says, I'm at one time Nazir, whether large or small, even if he says, Mikan at Seifa Olam, all it means is Nazir for 30 days. Says the Gemara, why is it only a Nazir for 30 days? He said from now until the end of the world. Answers the Gemara, you know what he really meant? He meant that it's difficult to me like a Nazir until now, until the end of the world. But he really only wants to be a Nazir for 30 days. And we ask Akasha, says the Gemara. If someone says, I'm a Nazir from now until Makim Plaini, a Mishtan Dav Ches, we evaluate how many days it is. Less than 30 is a 30-day Nazir. More than that, it's whatever amount of days of the journey. Says the Gemara, why? Why don't we say that it's just difficult to him like the journey? Why are we actually counting the days? Answers the Gemara, because he's on the road. If he's on the road and he says, I'm a Nazir, like the days on the road, so that means he's being precise. Says the Gemara, okay, but how do you know it goes by days? Maybe it goes by a parsa. Rapapa, it's madcha, place they don't count by a parsa. Maybe it goes by avni, the overnight lodging. Do we not learn in a Mishnah that if someone says, this is the same Mishnah on Dav Ches, if someone says he's an uffer, like the dirt of the land, like the hair in his head, like the sea, sand in the sea, he's a Nazir Eilam, and he can be Magaleach once every 30 days. So what's the difference? Why in the Mishnah Dav Ches, when he says Nazir like the hair of the sand, we say he's a Nazir forever, and he just takes a haircut every 30 days, whereas here on Dav Zayin we're saying that he only means 30 days, and he just means it's difficult, like to the end of the world. So answers the Gemara that there's a fundamental difference, and there's two terutzim. Answer number one is anything that has an end time is not listed, whereas hairs on the head doesn't have an end time. There's no way to count the hairs in your head, and that's the reason why it's going to be forever. The second teretz, says Rabbah, is perhaps a little bit opposite, is that hair is different because they're muvdalais zu bizu. Says Gemara, 1 second, days are also separate from each other. Parshas Bereshis. Says Gemara, no, the Torah there is not telling you the days are separate. The Torahs are telling me a fundamental din, that the Jewish day is an entity of night and the day as one. And now we continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Dav Zayin Amud Aleph. That if someone says, Harini Nazir v'yoyim echad, what's the day? Excuse me, Harini Nazir v'yoyim echad, Harini Nazir v'shachas, Harini Nazir and 1.5. So 3 different statements. I'm a Nazir and Nazir on 1 day and 1 hour and a half. What's the halacha? All these 3 statements mean he has 2 Naziris. Says the Gemara, why did the Mishnah have to list all these cases? It's obvious. Answers the Gemara, if it said Nazir and 1, I would have thought that's the reason, because there's no such thing as any Naziris less than 1 day. And that's the reason why, let me just explain, when we say he's 2 Naziris, it means 2 30 days Naziris. Therefore, he says Nazir and 1. But maybe if he said a Nazir and 1 hour, maybe it just means a 31-day Naziris. That's why we have to list the first 2 cases in the Mishnah. And now we turn over to Zayin Amud Beis. And if we would have just had the case of a Nazir in 1 hour, I would have thought, you know what the reason is? Because he's not being so precise. That's the reason why once you're in that next hour, then it's in a whole new term of Nazirus. But when he says 1.5, that he's being so precise, maybe not. Maybe you should not count 2 full Naziruses. Kamash Milan, that's when the Mishnah had to list these 3 cases precisely to teach us in all these 3 cases, a Nazir in 1 day, a Nazir in 1 hour, a Nazir and a half, is 2 terms of Naziris that he accepts upon himself. We continue with the Mishnah on Zayin Amud Beis. If someone says I'm a Nazir for 30 days and an hour, Vishachas, or if he says Nazir, then what is he? A Nazir for 31 days. Because there's no such thing as a Nazir l'sha'is. And obviously this is different than the previous case in which he said, I'm a Nazir and 1 hour. Here he's saying a Nazir for 30 days and an hour, then it's going to be 31 days. Comes like Rav, and Rav says that the din of the Mishnah is only when he says, Shloishim ve'echad yoim. But if he says shloishim yoim v'yoim echad, then it's two different naziros because he breaks it up, says Rav. Then the din in the Mishnah does not apply, and then it's going to be two different nazirises. Says the Gemara, Rav clearly holds like Rabbi Akiva that darshins the actual lishaynais. As we learned a different Mishnah elsewhere, that when we said Elois Abar, Elois Ados, even though he writes precisely the depth and the width, etc., you still have to buy a road, says Rabbi Akiva. Whereas the Chacham say you don't have to buy the road. Whereas Rabbi Akiva is a Maida, but if he adds on extra words, Chutz me'elu, then you don't have to buy a road. So we see that Rabbi Akiva is darshaning the extra words that he says. Similarly, Rav darshans extra words that he says. So if he said Shleishim Yoim v'Yoim Echad, then there's going to be two nazirises. But he said 31 and a day, then there will not be two. If he says, Shloishim ve'echad yoim, then there will not be two nazirises. The Mishnah Rav is going like Rabbi Akiva, and that is the Chazara for Daf Zayin.